Imagine for a second that you are the most powerful king on earth. Like, your word is literal law.
Right. Absolute power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But right now, you are running for your life through the wilderness. You're absolutely terrified, just surrounded by the wreckage of your own empire.
It's a total collapse.
Yeah. But now, I want you to flip the script. Imagine you are the hero who just defeated that exact king.
The victor.
Right. The winner. You're being offered unimaginable wealth, total power, basically the literal keys to the kingdom. And you choose to, well, just turn your back. You surrender it all and walk away into the desert alone.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. So looking at those two extremes, right? The man who lost everything and the man who gave everything away, which one of them is truly free?
That is such a profound contrast.
Mm.
Because you have the man with nothing who is still a prisoner to his desire to rule.
Yeah.
And then the man who has the world at his feet, but realizes that holding on to it would become, its own kind of prison.
And that tension right there is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
So today we are looking at a genuinely incredible piece of source material. It's called Chasing Death, Episode 40, The Wanderer's Farewell.
Such a great text.
Oh, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to explore the immediate, just chaotic fallout of a massive supernatural war. We're going to look at the catastrophic fall of the tyrant Nebuchadnezzar.
The big loser of this war.
Exactly. And then we're going to track the really mysterious, eternal path of his conqueror, this man named Zayn.
Because, history usually just stops at the victory parade.
Right, the confetti drops and we look away.
Yeah, we focus on the clash of armies and the exact moment the tyrant falls. But this text keeps going. It asks us to look at the actual mechanics of ultimate victory.
It's just so rare.
It is. We're going to explore the psychology of a fallen dictator and then the crushing heavy price of immortality, like what actually happens when the war is over, but your existence simply refuses to end.
Yeah, that part is so heavy. But to understand the victor, I really think we have to start by looking at the loser, Nebuchadnezzar.
We definitely do. Start in the mud.
Exactly. We open this narrative with him in just desperate flight toward the ancient city of Nineveh. And I love the phrasing the text uses here. It says he is being pursued by the wreckage of his own pride.
Oh, that's such a good line. Because he isn't just running from Zayn's forces.
No, not at all.
He's fleeing the collapse of his entire paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
He arrives at Nineveh, just completely exhausted, only to discover that the infrastructure of his power has already crumbled.
Yeah, the word beat him there.
Exactly. The news of his defeat traveled way faster than he did. The loyalist forces, along with his completely embittered local populace, they've already stormed his royal palace. His sanctuary is just gone.
And we actually see this collapse happen through the eyes of the governor of Nineveh, right?
Yeah, we do.
Which is crazy because this guy used to be a steadfast pillar of Nebuchadnezzar's regime. But he watches his defenses turn into what he literally describes as blood and dust.
Blood and dust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the governor, he abandons his post and he flees into the wilderness with just a handful of survivors. And the irony here is staggering. Halfway through his escape out in the middle of nowhere, the governor crosses paths with the retreating Nebuchadnezzar.
It is a phenomenal meeting.
Yeah.
I mean, two totally broken men. The king is described as being hollowed out by rage.
Just empty.
Yeah, but he's also grappling with this terrifying reality that he has to confess to his men. He was not defeated by better tactics, or a larger army.
Right.
He was humbled by a force that completely defies the natural order.
Yeah, he describes crimson clouds choking the sky, torrents of fire literally raining down from the heavens and decimating his army.
Just apocalyptic stuff.
Utterly apocalyptic. His companions are like biting their fingers in sheer disbelief because it just breaks their entire understanding of how the world works.
Of course it does.
But what blows my mind, right, is Nebuchadnezzar's reaction to all this. He just survived this supernatural event. He saw fire falling from the sky. And his immediate instinct is to say, okay, we need to go to Nubia, rebuild our military, and petition the king of Syria for an alliance.
Yes, because they helped them out decades ago.
Exactly. During some totally unrelated war, he's literally out there trying to cash in ancient geopolitical IOUs.
It's just the ultimate display of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the underlying psychology here, his ego is functioning as this massive protective shell.
Oh, for sure.
When faced with an incomprehensible higher power, something that drops fire from the sky, a normal person might experience a profound existential crisis.
They'd be on their knees.
Right, they might surrender.
Yeah.
But Nebuchadnezzar's brain simply cannot process that he has been removed from the board by something greater than himself.
It feels a lot to me like someone trying to run a totally obsolete operating system.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Like, he just faced this massive universe-altering software update, the fire from heaven, but he's still trying to double-click on his old mortal hardware.
Yeah.
He still thinks elephants and cavalry and, like, a political favor from Syria are going to fix a literal supernatural problem. It's like a disgraced CEO who just bankrupted a huge company but is out in the woods plotting a comeback tour, expecting a bailout from an old golf buddy.
That is an excellent analogy. He acknowledges the supernatural fire externally, right? But he absolutely refuses to internalize the humility it requires.
Right, the internal change.
Exactly. He still believes power is something you can measure in troops and treaties. He still genuinely thinks he's the main character of history. And that obsession with physical, measurable power makes him incredibly fragile.
Which sets up this really brilliant thematic transition to the actual winner of this war. Nebuchadnezzar is obsessing over rebuilding physical armies because he thinks power is something you can touch. But if we look over at Zayn, the victor, who's currently residing in the Kingdom of Yemen, we see a man who understands that physical power is actually a liability.
The contrast there couldn't be sharper. While the tyrant is plotting in the dirt, the Kingdom of Yemen is bathed in this golden light of a massive triumph.
That's a huge party.
It is. King Hammurabi is hosting this magnificent celebration, and he gives a speech declaring that without their special minister, Zayn, they would all be swinging his corpses from the pillars of that very hall.
But when Hammurabi tries to heap all this glory onto Zayn, he just completely deflects.
He doesn't want it.
No. He credits his great lord, saying that it was divine mercy that saved them from annihilation. He claims he was really just an instrument. So Hammurabi, wanting to honor this, issues a royal decree to build a magnificent temple dedicated to Zayn's god.
Which is standard for ancient kings.
Oh, right. Totally standard. But this is where Zayn issues a very specific, totally unyielding demand. He says the temple must have absolutely no idols, no statues, no images, no physical representations whatsoever. It must be worshipped, as he says, in spirit and in truth.
And King Hammurabi is genuinely puzzled by this, because to an ancient king, a god without a statue is like a kingdom without a flag.
Exactly. It doesn't compute.
He asks, how shall he be worshipped? And Zayn just insists that the hall remain completely unburdened by stone or clay.
You know, when I first read that, I was really trying to figure out the mechanics of that refusal. Like, why reject a monument when you just saved an entire civilization?
It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, it does, but it kind of reminds me of data storage. Like, think about preserving a really vital piece of information. If you carve it into a stone tablet, it's vulnerable.
Oh, sure.
It can erode, it can be stolen, an enemy can come along and smash it. But if you upload that data to the cloud, it lives everywhere at once. It's totally untouchable.
So I'm thinking, is Zayn refusing an idol because an idol is really just a stone tablet waiting to be smashed? That is precisely the mechanism at play here. Physical things are corruptible. I mean, just think back to Nebuchadnezzar. He built massive statues to himself. He built giant siege engines.
And what happened to them?
They turned to blood and dust. By insisting on no idols, Zayn is fundamentally upgrading the kingdom's entire understanding of permanence.
Wow. Yeah.
If you want to destroy a traditional god, you burn down its temple and smash its statue. But if there is no statue, where do you swing the sword?
You can't.
Exactly. Zayn is forcing the people to recognize a power that cannot be broken, burned, or captured. He is protecting the legacy by making it completely intangible.
And making it intangible also completely removes the ego from the equation, which makes perfect sense for his character.
Definitely.
But there's a deeper, much more personal reason Zayn is so detached from these big golden celebrations. There's this incredible scene where Zayn slips away from the victory party.
Oh, this scene is amazing.
It really is. He goes out to this desolate, ruined temple where he originally made his supernatural pact. Now, I was reading this, fully expecting him to call upon this ancient entity to, like, ask for another favor or to celebrate the victory.
Right, cash in a reward.
Yeah, but the text reveals something completely different.
He calls out into the shadows, right, summoning the ancient spirit who actually helped him win the war. And when she appears in a flash of flame, the true cost of her intervention is finally laid bare. She tells him, "You have surrendered 2,000 years of your eternal life to me."
2 millennia. I mean, just let that sink in. And his reaction is what really caught me off guard.
He doesn't grieve at all.
No, he exhales, and the text describes it as a sound weighted with centuries, and he basically confesses that he paid the debt gladly. In fact, he tells her he wishes he could have given her all of his eternal life.
Yeah.
Because to him, living forever has become this crushing, agonizing burden.
It completely subverts our basic human programming.
It really, really does. Like, for anyone listening right now, think about our cultural obsession with longevity. We obsess over science, biohacking, diets, just trying to extend our lives by like a decade.
Right. Living to 100 is the ultimate goal.
Exactly. The idea of living forever is usually framed as the ultimate reward.
Yeah.
Yet here is a man who literally tips the bartender 2,000 years of his life and considers it a profound relief.
Yeah.
It really made me wonder, what is the actual psychological mechanism of immortality in this text? It doesn't seem like a cool superpower. It seems like severe chronic exhaustion.
That exhaustion is absolutely the core of his character, and the spirit actually offers a cosmic perspective on this. She pushes back slightly on his despair, telling him his weariness belongs only to the present moment.
Right.
But she uses a phrase that I think just unlocks everything. She says, he is traveling alongside history itself, witnessing the grand experiment of mankind.
The grand experiment. That phrasing is so specific.
Yes. Think about the implication of that word, experiment. Zayn isn't living a human life anymore. He is observing a trial run.
Wow.
It's the difference between being a player inside a video game, emotionally invested in every single battle, and being the programmer watching the simulation run from the outside.
You don't get mad when a pixel dies.
Exactly. You don't grieve when a single pixel changes color because you see the entire rendering. Zayn has watched empires be born, rise to glory, and crumble into dust so many times that the cycle has just lost its meaning for him.
So if you take the feeling of severe workplace burnout, that feeling where nothing you do matters because the exact same problems just keep happening.
Right, the endless treadmill.
Yeah. And you multiply that by 1,000, you get Zayn's internal state. He hasn't just outgrown a job.
Yeah.
He has outgrown human history.
Exactly. And that temporal disconnect, that is the mechanism driving his intense isolation. He cannot get attached to Hammurabi's golden victory celebration because his brain is already processing the inevitable fact that in a blink of an immortal eye, that shiny new kingdom is going to be an archaeological dig site.
That is so bleak, but so true, which totally explains his next move. He promises the spirit he will deliver a message that their pact is fulfilled, and she just vanishes.
Yeah.
And suddenly, being in this cozy palace with Hammurabi is clearly unbearable for him. He returns to the king and drops total bombshell. He says he has to leave immediately to restore the displaced queen and the young prince back in Nineveh.
And Hammurabi is devastated.
He really is. He offers him an army, a private luxury palace, total peace. He grieves as if he's losing a literal son. But Zayn refuses it all and just rides out into the deep desert completely alone.
And that journey into the desert serves as this massive psychological and spiritual transition. On the 5th day of his travel, this terrifying, prehistoric red sandstorm erupts. The text notes that the sky turns the color of literal blood.
When I read about that storm coming right after he leaves the kingdom, it felt less like a weather event and more like a violent baptism.
Oh, interesting.
Like the world itself is violently washing the role of victorious general off of him just so he can strip back down to being a wanderer. Am I reading too much into the weather there?
Not at all. You're hitting on the exact symbolism. The red dust and the fury of the wind, they absolutely represent the bloody, chaotic chapter he just closed with Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay, yeah.
He takes shelter in a cave, and during this incredibly violent storm, a thunderous, ethereal voice fills the air. It's the voice of his great lord, congratulating him, but also promising him absolute omnipresence.
The omnipresence.
Right. The voice says, "You will not see me, but I am everywhere. I shall hear your every breath."
And immediately after the voice speaks, the whole environment shifts drastically. A torrential rain falls, washing the desert completely clean. The air turns sweet, and this brilliant golden moon emerges.
It is a profound reset. The storm strips away his earthly attachments, right? And the omnipresent voice reminds him that while he is entirely isolated from mortal humanity, he is fundamentally not alone in the universe.
That's a beautiful way to see it.
The golden moon is basically his green light. It prepares him for his final act of detachment.
Which brings him to his final destination, Nineveh. Or, well, at least what mortals would consider a final destination.
All right.
He arrives to this massive hero's welcome. The border guards are erupting into cheers. His old allies embrace him. The restored queen and the young prince greet him with garlands of flowers. Like, he actually did it. He saved the city.
And the queen does exactly what Hammurabi did. She convenes a formal court, gestures to the massive splendor of the restored palace, and she appoints Zayn as chief minister for life.
The ultimate reward.
She literally says, "This is your own country." She is offering him the ultimate happily ever after.
And for the final time, Zayn refuses. He says his path compels him onward. But there is this one tiny moment during this farewell that honestly hit me harder than any of the massive battles we've discussed.
The slip of the tongue.
Yes. His friend Asher asks him a very simple question. He says, "Where will you go?" And Zayn has this haunting slip of the tongue. He says he doesn't know. He says perhaps he is fated to wander the, quote, parched and shifting deserts of history until the very day of judgment.
And the queen's reaction to that is just crucial. The text says she gasps in astonishment.
Yes, she literally gasps. It's such a visceral reaction to this bizarre, incredibly ancient phrasing. Zayn instantly realizes he let the mask slip, you know?
Yeah, he caught himself.
He quickly covers his tracks, he softens his voice, and just calls himself a simple traveler. But I kept wondering, why did he let his guard down in that specific moment? He's been so intensely disciplined this whole time.
He let his guard down because he is, despite his immortality, profoundly lonely.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
He even admits that Nineveh had become a home to him in his heart. In that fleeting second, standing with people he fought alongside, he desperately wanted to be known. He wanted to share the crushing reality of his existence with his friends.
But the queen's gasp totally ruins it. It just reminds him of the permanent wall between them.
Precisely. To understand why she gasps, you really have to look at the mechanics of how mortals perceive time versus how an immortal perceives it.
Okay, unpack that.
To the queen, the idea of wandering on Judgment Day isn't a poetic metaphor. It is monstrous. It is genuinely terrifying.
Right, because for us, time ends.
Exactly. For her, it means outliving your children, your kingdom, your language, and your culture over and over and over again. Zayn's slip of the tongue accidentally reveals this existential horror that her mortal brain just recoils from.
And that right there is the ultimate tragedy of Zayn's character. He can save mortal kingdoms, but he can never truly belong to them. His isolation is absolute. The higher he climbs, the more he protects humanity, the less he is actually allowed to live inside it. He can't even share his true self with his closest friends without absolutely terrifying them.
Which is what makes his final departure so incredibly poignant. He shakes their hands. He rides out of the gates. The royals escort him as far as they can, but eventually the literal borders of their mortal realm force them to stop and turn back.
They have to go back to their lives.
Right. They have finite lives to live, kingdoms to run.
And Zayn is just left alone again. The narrative ends with him surrendering the reins of his horse to Providence. The text paints him as a lone figure adrift in the, quote, fathomless, swirling ocean of history as evening falls.
It's beautiful.
It is such a cinematic, beautifully controlled ending.
It perfectly closes the thematic loop we opened with Nebuchadnezzar.
It really does. So let's bring this all together for the listener, because there is a really profound takeaway here that goes way beyond the fantasy lore. We just explored two massive figures who both experienced a total loss of their present reality. Nebuchadnezzar lost his kingdom, and his immediate, frantic reaction was to try and violently force the pieces back together. He simply couldn't imagine a reality where he wasn't the ruler.
And then, on the other hand, you have Zayn, a man who won a kingdom, who was handed ultimate power on a silver platter, basically twice in 1 week. And he gave it all away.
Every bit of it.
He walked away because he possessed the terrifying clarity to know that everything mortals build is ultimately temporary.
And that is the real takeaway here. Look, none of us are fighting supernatural wars with crimson clouds and fire raining from the sky.
Thankfully.
Right, thankfully. And none of us have to endure the crushing exhaustion of living for thousands of years. But we all face moments of massive victory and catastrophic defeat in our careers, our relationships, our personal lives.
We all have our own kingdoms.
Exactly, and the text challenges us to look really closely at our own reactions. When things fall apart, do we act like Nebuchadnezzar? Do we obsessively cling to our temporary titles, our status, our modern palaces, completely refusing to accept that the world has changed?
Or, conversely, can we adopt a sliver of Zayn's perspective? Can we recognize the grand experiment for what it is and hold our own successes and failures just a little more lightly, knowing that the physical monuments we stress over are ultimately just dust in the wind?
It's really about the isolating nature of ultimate success. Like, if you define your entire existence by the kingdom you build, you might just find yourself trapped inside it.
A prisoner of your own making.
Precisely. Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you with today. Just something to mull over as you go about your week. If you were cursed, or maybe blessed, with living through the entirety of human history, what would you actually do?
It's a heavy question.
It is. Would you try to aggressively shape it as a king, building massive monuments to yourself so you wouldn't be forgotten? Or would you, like Zayn, choose to be an eternal wanderer, just watching the grand experiment unfold from the shadows?